und die Webkamera. Aber der Titel.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, please have a seat. Good morning and a warm welcome to today's event, Beyond Today, UAE Energy Transition Journey Program. And we're first going to start the event with a smaller side event hosted by the Emirati-German Energy and Climate Partnership here in this wonderful location, the UAE Pavilion at COP28, where we will look into what seems to be the growing consensus on the need of mutual recognition of certification of green hydrogen schemes, as well as getting a glimpse into a new UAE wind potential study that has been done by our colleagues at Guidehouse. My name is Karin Zangal. I'm part of the team at the German Emirati Joint Council for Industry and Commerce, the AHK, implementing the bilateral energy and climate partnership together with my co-moderator, Matthias Schimmel, who will be speaking a bit later. And hopefully we will be guiding you rapidly and smoothly through the event. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Sharif Al Olama, the Undersecretary at the UAE Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. Your Excellency.
Good morning to all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In all honesty, I was not planning to be here today, and I was just informed maybe 15 minutes ago by Deepak that there is a session taking place. And because how dear is the Emirati-German energy partnership to my heart, I just had to come out here and maybe mention a few words. As I have said, maybe I sound like a broken record, but this partnership is a role model for all the other engagements we've had on a government level with any of the other countries. We always use this partnership as a role model, and we build on what we have established over here. It started back in 2017, and honestly, we are very proud of what we have been able to achieve with our German counterparts. Very heartfelt thanks to all the team that have been working on this, it being AHK, it being the German Federation, it being the team from the UAE side. Really, the efforts have been amazing. The UAE, of course, as you know, we have leapfrogged in our transition journey. And the numbers that are being announced or was announced in our Energy Strategy 2050 just are a showcase of where we're headed when it comes to the energy transition. By the year 2030, we will have around 20 gigawatts of clean energy that would fix or cover around 30 to 35% of our energy mix. And that is just the beginning, and our aspirations are much higher than that. When it comes to hydrogen as well, we do have a hydrogen strategy that was developed jointly with the help of GHD and Fraunhofer Research Institute, and we are targeting to produce 1.4 million tons of hydrogen by 2031. I believe One aspect, and one very important aspect that might be discussed today, is the issue of standards and certification. And this is crucial. We have actually initiated these discussions with our German counterparts, and we are also doing it on a bigger scale with the EU. It is crucial for us to have full alignment when it comes to certification with the countries that we plan to export to. At the end of the day, we do not want any bottlenecks. We will be producing a lot of hydrogen, it being green or blue, and these have a potential of being exported to Germany, the Netherlands, and other places in Europe. And it is crucial for us to have alignment in terms of what certifications and what requirements are needed. So I won't dwell too much because I haven't really prepared a comprehensive speech for this opening, but I wish you guys all the best. I would love to stay longer. A pleasure to see Ellen again, my colleague, that we had good work together. And I wish you best for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, also for hosting us today. For our next welcome address, I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Falk Böhmecke. He's head of the Division Bilateral Climate and Energy Cooperation at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action.
Thank you very much. And good morning to everybody. Thank you for your kind word, Your Excellency, Sharif Al-Olama. I think the Emirati-German Energy and Climate Partnership is really one of Germany's most successful and active partnerships. You called it a role model for you. I think I can say the same from a German perspective. It was founded on our shared vision to transition towards sustainable energy, and it has expanded massively over the past years. So we have expanded our cooperation to climate issues just last year, and since then had multiple exchanges, for example, on carbon pricing, where experts and policymakers exchange between the UAE and Germany, including here at the COP28. We are strategically supporting energy projects with the Energy Security and Industry Accelerator, which is very important because it's concrete. There are concrete projects that we're looking at and that we're trying to accelerate and bring forward. And last but not least, we have founded a hydrogen task force to support our joint projects in the hydrogen field and facilitate future hydrogen trade, which you also mentioned, Your Excellency. Germany has vast experience on the energy transition and the expansion of renewables when it comes to technology, policy, but also regulation. So the toolkit for us for climate neutrality consists of three tools. One is renewable energy, one is energy efficiency, and one is hydrogen. And we need all three tools to reach climate neutrality. And Germany is obviously working on all three of them. When it comes to hydrogen, we just published an update of our national hydrogen strategy, and we constituted that we need 50 to 70% of hydrogen imports. So we will produce some of the hydrogen in Germany, but the rest will have to be imported. So we need reliable and good trading partners. And obviously the UAE comes to mind almost at first, because you were the first ones who delivered actually a test cargo to Germany last year with hydrogen, and we're very proud of that. So trade in general, but trade when it comes to hydrogen needs reliability and predictability. Companies who do the trade need to know what they are actually trading and buying and selling. So we need standards and certification of hydrogen products. And that's what we want to talk about today. At the moment, all eyes are on the UAE, on the COP28. The whole community, world community is looking at the UAE, and I really applaud UAE's role in bringing forward energy transition and climate action and being the host here at COP28. So thank you very much. I welcome very much this initiative of the UAE today and hope to contribute a little bit to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Böhmeke. And as already announced, before we delve right into the topic of mutual recognition of green hydrogen certification schemes within the framework of the Emirati-German Energy and Climate Partnership, our partners at Guidehouse analyze the potential of wind energy in the UAE, and the study will be launched today. To share the main conclusions briefly, I would like to invite Henrik Scholz from Guidehouse Managing Consultant to take the floor, please.
My apologies. I also have to thank Guidehouse. I did not mention Guidehouse, so thank you very much. Without you, we would not be here. So thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Yeah, thank you for your warm words, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to take a step back. We just heard that the UAE and Germany are working on setting up a value chain for green hydrogen. And for this, of course, renewable energy will be needed. The UAE is focusing on its huge potential for solar energy. With this study, we want to shed light on the almost untapped potential for wind energy in the UAE. So, what are the drivers for wind energy in the UAE? First, it's the commitment to reach net zero by 2050. Second, it's also what is coming up here at COP. It's the ambition to triple the renewable energy capacity on a global level. And it's the ambition to become a hydrogen export country in the UAE and the growth in the electricity demand that we see. So here's the results of our study. So what our analysis brought up is that offshore wind energy conditions in the UAE are not so beneficial. The reason is that onshore wind conditions are more beneficial. So the low wind speeds at the UAE territorial waters do not justify the higher investment costs for offshore wind energy. So it's recommendable to focus on the onshore wind energy potential in the UAE. The UAE has already launched a wind program just right before COP at 4 different locations. 23 turbines have been deployed. We see it here. Okay. We see this here indicated on the map. The greenish areas on the map are the lower wind potentials, and the reddish areas are the high wind potentials. So we see that the best potential for wind energy in the UAE is located in the southwest region, close to Liwa and close to the western border. This area is a desert region, so there's not a lot of land use conflicts, but of course there's sand dunes, so this is a technological challenge that needs to be overcome. But if we have a look at the technological challenges that have been solved for offshore wind energy, waves and natural conditions, the desert region challenges might be solvable. So the wind speeds at the southwestern region of the UAE are at 8 meters per second at 150 meters of height on annual average. And what also makes the case for wind energy in the UAE is that wind speeds are stronger at night than during daytime. And this combines very well with the generation pattern of solar energy. It balances the power mix, and this is very beneficial for the production of green hydrogen. So what we see on a global level, also in Europe and also here emerging in the UAE, is that there will be a significant demand for green hydrogen. This implies a huge demand for renewable energies. Combined with the UAE ambition to become a hydrogen leader, there's manifold benefits for wind energy to be explored in the UAE. It's an additional clean energy source that will help to reach the net zero target by 2050. It balances the power mix, and it allows for a higher utilization of hydrogen electrolyzers and decreases the costs of hydrogen production. So yeah, this is the point we want to make. Please find the QR codes that bring you to the download of the study on your seats and get into the results in more detail. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Henrik. And as already mentioned, you can find the study on the QR codes. For our panel discussion, I would like to invite Matthias Schimmel, Associate Director at Guidehouse, to introduce the panelists.
Thank you very much, Karin. Thank you, His Excellencies. So we've heard a lot about hydrogen trade, but for trade, you need rules and standards. And this is also the topic of today's panel. I would like to invite Dr. Falk Böhmig here again to the panel. Then we also have Sharif from the ministry, who's working heavily on hydrogen. And we also have Florian Merz from Mazda, who's working on hydrogen here in the UAE. Welcome. Deepak, thank you. Sorry. So we have to make this very efficient since we only have 15 minutes. So we've heard a lot about hydrogen already today and I guess throughout the COP. And the UAE is really very ambitious. You just recently launched the hydrogen strategy. You're really focusing both on domestic but also heavily on exports. So can you give us a few more insights on what the UAE's take is on certification standards when it comes to hydrogen?
Good morning all. So just a quick, before I start, he's right, we've just released the hydrogen strategy, so you should go to the website and find that strategy from there. It's a quite extensive strategy which has been done in partnership with our German partners, mainly Fraunhofer, and then also some Australian partners as well, GHD. So in that, all you need to understand is that yes, we're going to go for 1.4 million tons of hydrogen by 2031, which is 0.4 is blue and 1 is green. So, Mazda, that's what I was pointing at. Sorry. So basically, all this, when you're getting all this hydrogen, there's a lot of, in fact, not a lot of it. Most of it in this particular strategy is for export. Then after that, in the coming months, as everyone else also is looking at their own strategies and they devise it further on, we'll be looking at the net zero part. And you know, most people here, when they see 1.4, they straight off start thinking, you know, yeah, this must be all for the net zero and the export and all that. No, it's export. Net zero is coming up. It has got its own full heavy number on board, which means that is going to be for the UAE to actually come to net zero by 2050. Now, the export part of it, which is the first part, and today's conversation, so I come back now to the conversation, is the how do we certify that it's green? And I also want to discuss it if we can, how do we certify if it's blue? Okay, if we can do it, I would like to get into that a little bit. So work has started, but we've not gone too far with it. Okay, so the work has started on certification and all that, but there is not much here where I can say to you, go there and you will find the layout of it. The best one I can tell you right now at the moment is that if you go to UWIC's website, you will see a green certificate for industries. So it's not for green hydrogen, but for industrial the products. So green certification in the UAE has started, but it's green. It's not green hydrogen. Okay.
So thank you, Deepak. So indeed, work in progress. And you already pointed towards your neighbor who's wearing a green tie and who wants to produce green hydrogen. So that's a nice match. So from a private sector perspective, so what is the role of green hydrogen and the certification of it from a private sector, from a Mazda perspective?
So welcome, my name is Florian Mertz here. And Masdar, as said, is the new entity which is found in the UAE by the strong shareholders, which is ADNOC, TAQA, and Mubadala. The three put together this company to have a national champion for green hydrogen. This national champion means that we are based in the UAE, but we produce around the globe. So for us, a standard is key. But let me get first back to what you asked, where do we see the areas for deployment? We see that the areas for deployment in the UAE is in the industries which are for the export, and we have seen and now our first joint activity with Emirates Steel, where we have green hydrogen to decarbonize the steel production, and it's as a start, more to come. We look at other vectors for export, which is ammonia and methanol, and foremost sustainable aviation fuel. And here the point is very clear. We have got two things which are required. One is from the political side, the regulatory set, so which we have strongest on sustainable aviation fuel, which we fully support. And then Deepak mentioned the standard. And here is some news breaking a bit in a few hours from a joint initiative which the ministers are doing in parallel here, together with the industry on certification standards for the industry. And so we are very proud that the UAE is part of this, that the UAE entities are part of this, with ADNOC for the blue, with Mubadala and Masdar all behind it. And this is a sign for how the UAE do business in partnership. We all put together public, private, and between the entities in the UAE.
So it's really a collaborative effort amongst all stakeholders. And since you mentioned partnerships, I want to bring in the German side as well. We've heard it from the exporters. Germany will be heavily dependent, as it is today, on energy imports, also when it comes to hydrogen. So if you could share some insights on where you sit from the German side and what role certification and recognition on a global level plays, and where we stand from a more international perspective as well.
Yes, thank you very much. As I have said in my opening remarks, we have updated our national hydrogen strategy, and we have identified, or we expect, 95 to 130 terawatt hours of hydrogen need in 2030. So that's a lot of hydrogen. And as I also mentioned, we expect that 50 to 70% of this amount will have to be imported in form of pure hydrogen, in form of ammonia, in form of methanol and sustainable aviation fuel. And we are talking about green hydrogen that is, from the German perspective, the most sustainable way to go forward. The market is open, so if somebody wants to deliver blue hydrogen, which is also a contribution to climate efforts, then the market is open. But in the long run, we would expect that green hydrogen will be the most dominant product. So the goal that we have is that we set up a global market for hydrogen. So hydrogen becomes a new commodity that is traded. And in order to do that, we do need standards and we do need certification. And there is a difference between the two. It could well be that different regions in the world have different standards of what they are looking for. So the European Union has published the so-called Delegated Act, which is a definition of what we see in the European Union as green. That doesn't mean that everybody else in the world also needs to have the same definition, but European importers need to get the assurance that when they import, that this definition in the EU is fulfilled, and that has to be certified. And in order to not send European certification agencies around the world, we would like to see a system globally where it is certified, for example, in the UAE, and we recognize this certification. That makes things, trade, and companies' lives much easier. And it accelerates things also. And this is what you have announced, Florian, what is happening right now as we speak, that globally we would like to set up a system of mutual recognition of this certification. And I think this will bring us a huge step forward, because in the end, companies do the trade, not governments. And so we need to, as governments, need to set up the framework, but then companies can do the job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Falk, and also for highlighting the difference between standards and certification. They're not equal, but they complement each other and they need to be mutually recognized. So coming back to the UAE, we mentioned collaboration and partnerships. Deepak, can you provide a few more details on how that collaboration looks within the UAE? What different roles do you foresee for the different actors now and then also going into the future?
Okay, so this is collaboration now in the UAE part, right? So we have, first of all, it starts here where we are, which is the federal ministry. This is the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. So the federal ministry is involved in the federal strategy, right? So it looks at all the Emirates. Then you go down a bit and you start looking at some, maybe people are aware, Department of Energy, which is in Abu Dhabi. They actually start looking at policies, legislations, and the detailed work, and even say, for example, when we're going for a hydrogen hub, they'll be doing the design with people like UNIDO or whatever organizations. But they look after Abu Dhabi. Once this is done, then after that we start looking at all the Emirates side. So this is DOE, then you got the federal. Then there's obviously another ministry called MOCA, which is a climate ministry. They will start looking at the carbon credits. They will start even looking at the standards and the certifications and all that. So you can see that these three players, the ministerial players, are at the top. Then obviously we don't forget the collaboration between all the stakeholders of UAE, which is Masdar, who's taken care of so any hydrogen business it goes through Masdar. Whether it's green, I'm sure it's whether it's blue as well, because green and blue, Masdar will look after hydrogen. Then you got obviously ADNOC, and you got ADQs, the financing guys, the ADIOS, the Mubadlas, then obviously the users, Emirates Steels and your EGAs and all that. I can carry on, but I can see that it's only 2.21 left.
Time is indeed counting. But yeah, thanks Deepak for shedding the light on the different roles of the various actors along the UAE value chain. And as you mentioned, time is ticking. I want to ask each of you one last question. So if you could summarize what needs to happen, like what needs to happen within the next 12 months to really kickstart the process of mutual recognition, starting with you, Florian Merz, please.
So from our side, I would like to apply the topic of the former Nike slogan, "Just do it." So we need to start with doing projects which are, let's say, easily realizable, because we need to get learned by it, and that is key. And this applies also for the topic of now, as we have got a certification, we need to test it, apply it, and learn by doing this. And once this is proven, this unlocks the global trade for which we stand, because we would like to position the UAE accordingly.
Thank you. Falk, please.
Well, I think we're entering a new phase in the hydrogen global market now. There was a phase of people didn't really know where we stand, what we need, what the definitions are, what the framework will be, and I think we have figured out quite a lot of that. We're still in a process. But now I would completely agree with you. Now production has to start. We need to build up logistical chains, and then obviously we need the demand side, which in Germany we are heavily involved in with the transition of our industry. So we're creating the demand. And then a lot of things have to come together at the same time, the investment question, the financing question, the certification question, and we need to do quite a lot of things in parallel, but I think we are very much on track doing that, and we need to stay in contact, and that's why it's important to talk with trading partners and within partnerships. What is your experience in building up this production? What is our experience in the need? And does it fit together? And where can we complement each other?
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we've run out of time.
It's okay. You'll lose it. I was going to give you some really good one. I'm just joking.
So thank you very much. Let's stand up and let's take one group photo.
test. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, a warm welcome to today's event on aligning energy and climate strategies, holistic planning for a clean energy future. I'm honored to be your MC and moderator for today's session. My name is Dr. Melisande Liu. I'm Partnerships Manager at the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is a powerful coalition of 29 of the leading economies who represent more than 90% of renewable energy capacity, 80% of global clean energy investment, and the large bulk of R&D that goes into renewables. The SEM is a truly multilateral platform. It was formally established in 2009, and it uses 3 key levers to help member governments decarbonize their economies. The first I comes from inspiration, and that is showcasing leadership in creating a virtual cycle of efforts by positively collaborating amongst governments. The second I comes from insights, so we work with governments to share experience and knowledge based on best practices, ideally not only on the efforts that have worked, but also on those that haven't. And the third I comes from impacts, and that is through commitment and action, and really bringing our governments together to build an impactful way towards the goal of decarbonizing by mid-century. Today's session is the event of our LTS working group, a joint effort between the SEM Secretariat and the fantastic team at IRENA. It was launched, IRENA LTS network was launched as a campaign at our 9th Clean Energy Ministerial in Copenhagen. In 2018. It's co-chaired by the Danish government and the German government, and it brings together a powerful community of 28 member countries and more than 12 technical partners, including the likes of WEC, World Bank, Get Transform, NREL, and many others. We're happy here today to have the discussion on a particularly important topic, which is energy planning and modeling. And today's session will focus on 2 particular policy tools. And one is the long-term energy scenarios, LTS, which has been used for decades by policymakers to really create the blueprints that are needed to develop energy scenarios by mid-centuries. And the other one is a more recent tool that is called the long-term low-emission development strategies, LT-LEDs, which was introduced by COP21 in 2015, which is a voluntary tool for countries to really address those challenges and opportunities to decarbonize and to address the structural transformations that come with the transformation. So the guiding questions of today's session will be, how can LTS-based planning documents and LT-LEDs be aligned to effectively and holistically address all the transformational challenges that countries need to overcome to get to net zero by mid-centuries? And how can we make sure that these are designed in a way that are transparent, that are holistic, and that are also participatory along the way? I therefore warmly invite everyone in this room to delve deeper with us into this session and looking into the very technical aspects and modeling world of LTS, LT-LEDs, and NDC scenarios. Our session today is structured in 2 parts. Part 1 will start with an introduction and a presentation by our IRENA colleagues on IRENA's current work on long-term energy scenarios modeling. And then we'll also dive deep with the technical discussion with experts this afternoon and look into the more day-to-day challenges and barriers that exist. So please welcome my esteemed colleague, Dr. Asami Miketa, Head of Energy Transition Planning and Power Sector Transformation at IRENA, for a scene-setting presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to share some of the insights that we have gathered from our recent study that we compare LTES and LT-LEDs. We believe in the value of long-term energy scenarios and long-term planning. We believe that effective implementation is enabled by the effective long-term planning. We believe that setting long-term goal is a critical enabler for the near-term investment. So in this belief, IRENA has been running the network of government working on scenarios. And already Melisande very nicely introduced our work. We have a network of 29 countries, technical partners, including UNFCCC and World Energy Congress. We have a pleasure of having the experts from these two organizations. And today, I'm going to present you the preliminary findings on the alignment of the two key long-term planning documents, which is LTES, long-term energy scenarios, and the LTLEDs, long-term low-emission development strategies. So we have compared different documents. Our comparison is based on the G20 countries for now. We are going to present, this is the ongoing analysis where we actually assess 52 countries, and we are planning to publish the report by the mid next year. But for now, we focused on the analysis for G20. So I'm going to present a G20 analysis. And I would like to mention that out of G20, only 13 countries have both LTES and LTLEDs. So we focused on the documents from these 13 countries. And this is preliminary findings from this analysis on the institutional aspects. So who prepared LTES and LTLEDs, and we also compared NDC. As you can see from this figure, LTES was mainly published by the Ministry of Energy, and LTLEDs is published by the Ministry of Environment or Climate, which we can imagine that this is the case. And NDC is also developed by the Ministry of Environment mainly. I also would like to highlight that some countries have no distinction between Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Climate. There are more and more countries actually deploying the integrated ministry that both look at energy and climate at the same time. So this is highlighted in this gray area where integrated ministry or some kind of coordination mechanism has been established. And on the below, we show that inclusion of LTS or the difference, if there is any mentioning of LTS in the LTLEDs and NDCs. So whether the climate documents have a clear difference to the energy documents. And the result was that 33% of the documents actually did make a reference to the LTS, but others are not. Actually, we also did the other way around, the analysis of whether energy document include a reference to the climate document, and it was actually much more prominently the energy document make a reference to the climate document. So how can we interpret this? We can interpret that the national energy plans are often not referenced in the climate document means that maybe the energy part is left out. That's one possible interpretation. But other possible interpretation is that probably the climate is becoming the mainstream goal where the energy documents are coming from the climate. Or it's also possible that energy planning experts are more experts in doing this scenario analysis, therefore they are more they are better in making the reference to each other. So we have different assumptions about this, and we are to explore this assumption further more. And these are the some of the analysis of the what's the coverage of these two documents. And you see that, of course, LTLEDs covers longer term by 2050. Most of the documents, some of the documents goes only 2045. And the LTS comes much different type of lengths. And we wanted to compare the alignment of these two documents for different countries. And we decided to take 2030 as a year of comparison because this is the year where we can find most of the data. So here it's a comparison of different documents. And first I want to mention that here we have 9 country points. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yes. So I said that initially we analyzed 13 countries out of 20. But here we mapped only 9 countries. Why? It's because some of the countries, they do not actually have good quantitative information. So 9 out of 13 has a very good data points that clearly indicates, for example, the renewable energy targets are not targets, renewable energy deployment were not often referenced clearly in the climate documents. So how do we read this, this map? So here, the center point is indicating perfect alignment. Upper part is the LTS more ambitious. Lower part is LT-LEDs more ambitious. And we have assessed different indicators, and on the left, we mapped out the energy indicators. We have like few indicators that looked at alignment, and this is the average of the alignment for the energy indicators. And on the right side, it's alignment on the emission indicators. And here you can see there's one country that is in the middle, and all the time perfect alignment. This is France. And we believe that France has a perfect alignment because they have a very good integrated planning process. There are some countries that are, okay, so out of 13 countries, 7 countries, LTES and LT-LEDs are scenario-based. And we believe that scenario-based approach gives a little bit more clearer quantitative information. And we have 2 countries that are not scenario-based included in this map, which is the South Africa and Germany. They are, both of the scenarios, both of the LT-LEDs are not scenario-based, but Germany, if you compare Germany and South Africa is a little bit more aligned in terms of the 2 documents compared to Germany. And we think that it's because in the case of South Africa, although this is not coming based on the scenario, but there's a clear reference to the energy documents. So we can look at very interesting aspects by analyzing the documents in a close, in this way. So this is my last slide. So some of the key messages. So we see that LT-LEDs and NDC sometimes lacks clear quantitative information on the renewable energy indicators. And more than half do not actually include quantitative renewable energy data. Also, there are alignment gaps between the national plans, and that can indicate maybe the weak institutional coordination. And then LT-LEDs and NDC generally reference to each other, but it does not often include the reference to the energy documents. Finally, we believe that scenario-based approach is an effective way to make sure that the planning is more comprehensive. And as I said, this is only the beginning of the analysis, and we continue to do this analysis. And if you have any insights to share, or if you have any hypothesis that you want us to validate, we're happy to hear, because this is still ongoing analysis. And this is what I wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Asami, for these insights and sharing Irina's work in this field. Working closely with LTS, I can say it's really a fantastic job you're doing with energy modelers around the world. We're now moving on to the second part of our discussion, which is a panel conversation with 2 experts from the field who've worked on energy modeling in LTS and emission and inventories for many years. So our first speaker brings more than 30 years of extensive experience in negotiating on climate change issues, evaluating mitigation options for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and establishing and designing measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions and removals. He has worked for many years as team leader of UNFCCC. He's director of professional programs at Greenhouse Gas Management Institute, or was former director, and has also worked for the International Civil Aviation Organization and is currently manager of the mitigation subdivision at UNFCCC Secretariat. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stelios Pesmajoglu to the stage. Take your seat. And our second speaker is nonetheless impressive. He has worked extensively on scenario development for the future of many countries, but particularly South Africa. So we just heard in Asami's presentation, Africa is one of those countries where we can have a deeper dive into. He's also developed a strong expertise in long-term trends and threats and opportunities in the African context, the African continent and more general. He's the director of scenarios at the World Energy Council, director of learning at the School of International Futures, SOIF in London, and an adjunct faculty member at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, where he teaches the annual Mastering Strategic Foresight course. In his role as WEC, he has been taken to many places, including the Middle East, Europe, and has facilitated many high-level dialogues on energy transitions. And he has also trained staff from over 30 UN countries in the use of foresight and scenario planning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marius Oosthuizen to the stage. Thank you. Dear Stelios, dear Marius, thank you so much for joining our conversation today. We're really delighted to have you here and to share some insights from your daily work. My first question goes to Stelios. From your work at UNFCCC, what can you tell us? What are the most effective strategies for countries in integrating LTS, LT-LEDs, and NDCs into a cohesive national policy framework? And from your experience, how do countries go about formulating their LT-LEDs? How do they integrate them into existing frameworks?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to participate at this event. From the UNFCCC perspective, I believe that all of you, I don't have to tell you, you know why we're here. We need to reduce emissions to those levels that are going to go to zero by 2050 if we are to meet the Paris Agreement goals. To achieve this, it is necessary for everybody to take action towards decarbonization. And they can do this, and they can provide this information through two different very powerful tools in the process. I'm grateful for the presentation that we heard earlier because it gives the background. The LT-LEDs is your guiding light, is where you want to be in 2050, is your aspirational goal, if you like. And NDCs provide you how you get there in 5 to 10 year steps. So between them two, they have to be aligned, in theory. Right now, what we have seen, and based on your assessment as well and our assessment, there is a misalignment. But we are in the beginning of the process. It is only a few years that parties under the Paris Agreement and within the UNFCCC process, they have been doing this exercise. It takes time to put the infrastructure in place from a national perspective in order to make sure that all of these things taken into account. On the energy sector specifically, having tools like the LEDs, where you have the long-term energy scenarios, is extremely important. Because this is, from a national perspective, what you need to make sure that you can take decisions on the ground. When you see what kind of scenarios you have, what your options in 2030, in 2040, 50, then you can see what makes sense to put in place at a national perspective. There is no one size that fits all in our process. And this is the reason why everybody's talking about the national determined contributions. Every country has to decide for itself what makes perfect sense and fits in national circumstances. And this is a very important part in our process, and this is what we have been trying to assist governments to look into that direction, taking a holistic approach, look at a whole government kind of approach. And for the energy, when talking about energy, is not only about looking at the energy sector. If, for example, if you want to look at renewable energy sources coming from biofuels, what kind of impact this is going to have in your agricultural sector? That's one example. How is your energy as a whole, your industry, is affected and what kind of steps you need to take in that direction as well. So you need to have a coordinated approach at the national level. And we saw earlier from the presentation that there are different organizations involved in different countries. It is not necessarily wrong that the Ministry of Environment is involved or it prepares the report, as long as behind it there is coordination and there is Ministry of Energy, stakeholders, industry, national and local communities, NGOs, everybody. It's a national effort. And everybody has a role to play in this exercise. And this is what we have been trying to push from our direction. At the same time, you also need to build capacities. I don't think any country can solve this problem by itself. So you need to have regional cooperation, regional coordination, and also try to see what countries can help others in this context. So it is not just one thing that I need to do. It's a multitude of things, looking at it from a holistic perspective and try to address all different aspects of it in a way that is going to move forward the sustainable development of the country. Just as a last point, everybody's talking about decarbonization, but decarbonization is not the only thing in play here. Because when you're looking into mitigation is one side of the coin, there's adaptation. And in a lot of countries, you have to take into account that adaptation and mitigation is the same thing. So, there is synergies, there is also co-benefits, and you need to look into that when you're addressing, climate change in order to move forward all your sustainable development objectives. So I will stop here.
Thank you very much, and I think you touched a good point here. It is a quite complex and long-term policy process, as you mentioned there, and it's really a lot of factors that governments need to take into account. The next question goes to Mr. Oosthuizen, and to the both of you, actually, but maybe Mr. Oosthuizen starts first. Mr. Oosthuizen, in your work with WEC and as a director there for energy scenarios, could you identify key challenges that countries face in aligning the long-term energy and climate strategies? What are the measures that countries can take to address these gaps to ensure a unified and effective approach to climate action? We've seen from Asami's presentation there are alignment gaps, and maybe you can help us understand where these stem from.
Well, thank you, and it's good to be with you and working alongside Irina and your colleagues. So at the World Energy Council, we've taken a fairly different view on the challenge. The temptation is to look at this as a techno-economic challenge, and that would lead us to look at the technology, to look at the business model, the value chain, to look for the solutions there. But what we believe is that this is much more of a complex societal challenge. And so we've settled on this term of humanizing energy to begin to think about how energy transition is not simply a techno-economic difficulty, it's not simply something for business to deal with or for government policymakers to deal with, it really is a society-wide challenge. To add complexity to that, as you mentioned, there are many different actors that need to be involved in the process, and so we think about this challenge of humanizing energy at 3 levels, at the global level, at the national level, and at the sectoral level. And so when you start to contemplate the complexity of facilitating energy transition at those 3 levels, global, national, and sectoral, and you start to understand that it is society-wide, then the instruments of doing so become much more sophisticated than simple policy planning tools. Much of the conversation so far has been focused on what we might call policy rationality, which says that if we want to make a difference in the future, we simply have to plan for it. And if we want to plan for it, we simply need an instrument. And so a long-term energy scenario or a long-term energy plan might be the solution. What we are saying is that those technical instruments are one part of the solution, but we need a much more sophisticated solution. And this is why at the World Energy Council, we are using what we call participative scenario planning or participative foresight. What that means is we can bring stakeholders at the global level together. COP is an excellent example of doing this, where we work at the multilateral level, we bring the stakeholders together, we enter into long-term strategic dialogue. But we also have to bring those stakeholders together at national level and at subnational level, at sectoral level. And so what we are seeing is that using participative scenarios or participative foresight allows us to structure a process that says, what do the sectoral interests look like in the short, medium, and long term? what do the national interests look like at short, medium, and long term? And then how do we align those with global interests? Just before our panel, we had the interesting opportunity to listen to Masdar talking with the UAE, of course, to the German government around trade, around renewable energy and hydrogen. And that's a good example of industry-led, country-led, demand-side transition. And that's a wonderful example of progress, but we have to appreciate how effective the German planning approach and the UAE planning approach is that enables that kind of process. For most of the world, particularly in Africa, many parts of Asia, you don't have a German government as rehearsed in their planning processes, or a UAE government as well organized in its supply side planning. And so the question is, how do we coordinate that multi-level interaction in the absence of state capacity, in the absence perhaps of the supply side investment? And then long-term energy scenarios become very useful because they provide a platform to bring those stakeholders around the table at the different levels and to craft a shared understanding of the challenge of what we call humanizing energy, which is a global, national, and local challenge. Let me pause there.
Thank you so much. And I love the idea of putting people at the center of this planning process, which is very complex, but which really takes into consideration their needs at all these levels. Mr. Stelios, could you also, I'll repeat the question here again. From your work at UNFCCC, could you identify the key challenges that you see there with working in this field with the UN countries in their alignment of these long-term energy and climate strategies? And what measures do you think they should be taking to address these gaps to ensure a unified and effective approach to climate action?
Yep, thank you again. What we see happening today in terms of emissions is based on decisions that we took 5, 10, 15 years ago. Usually governments take decisions on the energy on a 10, 15-year horizon. So lock-in effects are very important, and this is something that has to be addressed at all levels. So we need to make sure that if we want to be at zero carbon emissions by 2050, that we take the right decisions today. And this takes an approach that will involve, similar to what we heard earlier, everybody in the country, and I've also mentioned this before. So national coordination, again, involvement of all stakeholders, making sure that your energy plan aligns with your climate plan. And there has been a lot of discussion, since back in the early 90s about how you internalize all the external costs. And this is something that is still being discussed today, and still there is not been enough action on it. So trying to look at it not only from just one perspective, but both of them working together. And again, going back to the presentation from this morning, looking at this misalignment that we see right now, we expect this to change over time as countries putting in the right place their monies and their investments where they're supposed to be, looking into renewable energy sources for the future, looking into all different types of energy, new energy, and we're seeing a lot more research going on. So there need to be emphasis on all different types of energy moving forward and making sure that all the different ones that apply to the country are being able to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one final question to Mr. Oosthuizen. Susan, I think you touched on this already by saying that it is important to have these inclusive and participatory processes. Maybe we can zoom in a bit on this question of, first of all, why is it necessary to have these participatory, often quite lengthy processes? What is the benefit of that? And do you have any proven success mechanisms, maybe, to ensure that there's a broad engagement of stakeholders across the private sector, the civil society, and local communities? Why is it so important to build consensus?
So I think for a moment, let's take the conversation about transition out of the techno-economic realm and talk plainly about the challenge. In order to come to that question of why these processes are so important, I think first of all, we have to appreciate that actors in the system are going to act in their interests and according to their understandings, whether it's a private company, a government, or even a citizen complaining about the rising costs of energy or inflation. Their instinct is going to be to act in their own interest often in short-term interest as well as according to their own understanding of what is in their interest. And so the question that raises is, how do we shift the dial on how individuals or corporations or governments or collections of individuals, how they calculate their interests? How do we get a population in Europe that is under pressure due to inflation to understand that the short-term pain of rising energy costs is perhaps a necessary evil to avoid the long-term cost of a climate that is out of control? And so the way we do that is not through a policy document, but through a policy conversation or through a dialogue. And so the approach that we've taken is we have to bring the stakeholders around the table. We have to co-create a narrative that talks to the future that we want, the future in energy that we want, the future in climate that we want. And we have to create room at that table for voices that are not typically heard. And so to talk about practical examples, in South Africa, where we're decommissioning the Komati coal plant, the consequence of that is it affects the workers of that plant, but also the communities, the families, the wives, the children of that plant. Now, if you don't bring those stakeholders to the table, you will create a backlash and you will lose your social license to operate, both as business and as government. And so what we have to do is we have to preload our ability as the private sector to act, or our ability as government to act. We have to preload that with very high levels of trust among the stakeholders and a social license to operate, or the political will. And the only way to do that is through dialogue and engagement. And we see that being true at local level. We see it being true at sectoral level, where in some instances parts of a supply chain or a value chain are going to lose out in the short term, but if they are retrained, if they are able to be brought back into new emerging components in a new supply chain, there are benefits. And so facilitating the interaction between the social partners to clarify what's in it for them can help them make better long-term decisions as opposed to getting stuck in the short-term trade-offs.
Thank you so much. And I like that you bring in real examples from South Africa, and especially knowing that the coal ministry is, in fact, a very powerful ministry that also has a lot to say in terms of labor, in terms of unemployment. So I think it really shows how important these processes are. We have a few minutes left, and maybe one final question to the both of you. The SEM works closely with member countries, and this year we're especially close with the G20 process, as we have been last year. So we'll be working very closely with Brazil in their G20 presidency. So if you had one key recommendation to give to governments to how they would approach this and how they would best integrate these LTS, LT-LEDs, and NDC processes, what would it be? What would your key takeaways be? 2 minutes, please, each.
Maybe in brief terms, I think governments have to date framed the question of climate adaptation and transition as a necessary evil. And I think the opportunity is to frame it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We're starting to see that a little bit with legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, with the Green Deal and other legislation, but there really is an opportunity to ask the more fundamental question: how can energy transition and climate adaptation benefit those who are excluded in the traditional systems, the energy system, the industrial system? How can we make that process inclusive? And I think by reframing it in that way, we can bring many more stakeholders to the table, unlock investment that can be quite fundamentally transforming for society. That requires a more courageous and visionary approach, and I hope at the G20 we'll see some of that.
Yes, thank you. This is something that we have been trying to do under the UNFCCC, bringing all the different stakeholders together, trying to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction. It is a challenge that is ongoing because, again, priorities are different around the world. You know, when we look at it from a global perspective, if you want to focus on the G20 or the other states, there the situation is, again, is different in the different countries. What's my advice would be to start early. Make sure that you have everybody on the table, just to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction, have the same understanding, and make sure that you have also the resources, capacity, in order to make sure that you can move forward for implementation. It is not just about planning, it's actually about action on the ground. And this is what is missing in this process, because we're talking for the last 28 years, but what we're seeing is not enough action on the ground. And we need to take the next step move forward, make sure that industry and all the different stakeholders are moving together in that direction. So this is, for me, the missing link to going from here where we are in the COPs and the substars, going to actually in the countries and making a difference.
Thank you so much for the both of you. I think you've shared really incredible insights from your work on the ground. There's much to do, much for governments to act upon. I do hope that we can take some of your recommendations and actually implement them within the SAM and also within the LTS work streams and work with our member countries. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining our session today. And I'll be handing it over now to Dr. Miketa for some closing remarks. Thank you both. And for the audience here on the ground, we'll have both speakers at the session afterwards. If you have any questions, feel free to approach them. Thank you very much. Let's take a group picture. We'll take a quick group picture and then have closing remarks.
So thank you very much, Melisande, for excellent moderation. And also thank you very much for both speakers. It was excellent. I learned a lot. I also would like to thank our host UAE government, and particularly the team from the UAE Pavilion for facilitating this. And also special thanks to the Dr. Nawal Al-Haneh, who is actually a very active member of the LTS network to co-organize this event with us. Also, finally, I would like to thank the audience for joining this event and the people who are joining online. We presented the preliminary results from our LTS-LT-LEDS alignment study. And we saw that there are some misalignment and gaps for several of these scenarios in the G20 countries. And then we saw also some example of good practices for alignment. And we are going to continue this work and to expand analysis to 52 countries. Today we learned from UNFCCC that it's a very important, involving everyone is very important, to have resources, a capacity to do it on the way forward. I hear that positive expectation that people are putting more resources and technologies, and we hope that misalignment will be, in the future, hopefully getting more minimized. And from Marius, from WEC, you emphasize the importance of engaging everyone, including the citizens, industries, and we heard very interesting example from South Africa. Under the LTS network, as I said, LTS network is a network of the government planners, and we discussed what are the important agenda for the future for the energy planners. And this participatory process has been identified by many planners as a key element. It's one of the really key elements that makes the planning that has been running for maybe last 10, 20 years to the real planning that brings the change, the clean energy transition, because clean energy transition touches upon all corners of society, and that is something that government is realizing, and we are bringing that participatory process to this event. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice COP. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.